Welcome back to another episode of the Heart and Soul Conversations. Today I'm here with an old friend of mine, Esther Tankhilevich. Esther has a really interesting background. She has worked in the marketing world in the past, in corporate, actually risen very high in that environment, eventually was a CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, in a major company over in the US. I think you also have worked in the UK, right? And now she is a coach, and interestingly enough, a coach on assertiveness, which especially for women in the workforce and corporate environment, or even as entrepreneurs, is so valuable. So when we reconnected about this, I was so thrilled to have her on board here. Esther, maybe tell us in just a few sentences a little bit more about you and how you came to be an assertiveness coach.
Yes. So I think first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so pleased to be with you and to be talking about this topic that I am really passionate about. And I think what really in my coaching, as I was starting to really get across a volume of client conversations and hurdles, what I started noticing was this common denominator that was, clients having lots of different hurdles and obstacles that they were trying to work through. And it was coming back to a lack of assertiveness and how to navigate often a tough conversation or, a challenging topic. And I was just noticing this consistent sort of pattern in what we were talking about. And interestingly, the reason why that really stood out for me and struck a chord was that in my professional career, I typically didn't struggle with it. There was lots of other things that I was working on at the time. It was just assertiveness was something that was sort of innate and just natural for me, even at quite a young age. And what I found really interesting about that was, I started to think about what is assertiveness made of? What are the elements that make it up? And why is it that I found it easier than others? And when we were sort of going through our coaching conversations, I started sort of breaking it down into a few camps, and I really got excited about it because it really felt like such a gateway of empowerment from I don't know how to deal with the situation and I'm stuck to I can see my blueprint. I can see how to work through this.
Absolutely. It's one of those keys that when you put it in and you unlock it, there's not just one problem that you solve, but it ripples down into all the different areas of your life, right? Because assertiveness isn't just something that happens in our career. It's really important in our relationships. It's really important in parenting. As you know, you've got kids as well. So it's incredibly important. What you were just touching on is really interesting. You say there is a couple of defining factors that make up assertiveness. Tell us a little bit more about that. What do I need to tap into to be able to be assertive?
Yeah, so I think one really important sort of first piece is really just knowing yourself and having a good sense of who you are and your values, your beliefs, your personal priorities in any given situation. Because I think it's so much easier to be assertive when you know what you're about, how you're wired, how you work, and what matters to you. You're able to, it's sort of this quality of self-assuredness and certainty. And I think it's very difficult to be assertive if you're not coming from that clear place of knowing. So I think that's and sometimes that could be two things. That could be, a level of certainty of just yourself and who you are and your values, which is super, super important. But it's also in a micro sense, understanding what you want out of a particular situation or a particular communication. So I think it's the certainty of both, but really the first part is understanding yourself.
So it's basically stable ground to stand on, right? So that it's not like quicksand, and the minute somebody else challenges that, you fall over or you drown or something, but you know where you stand and it's solid. And with those values, with those beliefs, with a good sense of self, probably also you have a true north. That's how I always define it. Like, I know my true north. I know what's a yes, what's a no, what's right and what's wrong, and what I to deem good and correct, and the kind of person I am, and having integrity for me versus what doesn't. Totally agree. Okay, so knowing who I am, number one. What's number two? If we want to sum this up for the people watching.
So, and I think we could even go back to number one, because there's one other thing that we could, I think, just mention there, because what I said sort of sounds quite broad, but to be more, I guess, constructive or specific around that, because this is something that was immediately helpful in some of my coaching situations. So one way of getting this clarity and certainty about who you are, if you're thinking, I'm not really sure what my makeup is and what that is, or how I'm wired, or how I work, there are behavioral profiling tools, free behavioral profiling tools out there that can be super helpful and informative to help you understand how you work, how you're wired, what you need out of a particular situation. So as an example, let's say you've been asked to take on an extra project at work, and you're going to be really stretched to do that, and you're feeling, sort of conflicted about this, but you're not really sure how to navigate that conversation with your boss or with management. If you, for example, knew that you were someone who thrives with structure, planning, timelines, and metrics, and that's what you need to feel, sort of solid, then you can navigate that conversation in a much more constructive way to say, look, I love to help out the team where I can, but before I commit to this, I'd just love to sort of walk through, the timelines of this project, who else is going to be involved, what does it look like in terms of an overall plan, what are the metrics and targets, like, let me just get an understanding of the lay of the land, and then I can come back to you and let you know whether I can do this. And instantly you can be much clearer, much more direct with what you need, because that's how you work, and you can manage these conversations in a much less murky way.
And you know what? This is actually really interesting what you're saying. I love this, because not only does it allow me to then have what I need to perform well, it actually is one step towards assertiveness, I believe, in the way that you are not just being a yes man or yes woman and always saying yes and then afterwards holding a grudge. You're actually saying, I'm willing to do this, but these are the preconditions I need to be able to thrive. And what I've seen also, even just in negotiating a new job situation with a client recently and coaching her on how to navigate this, is when you are willing to really say, I can do this, but this is what I will need. I will need some additional training, and this is something I haven't done before, and I can only do it, say, as a 4-hour or 4-day week, but I can't work 5 days a week. When you're willing to really put it out there and have a structured framework, and you don't pretend to be perfect, but you're actually willing to put yourself out there and see, look, I want to do the best job for you, and I only can do this under these conditions. It often is respected by leaders.
Absolutely.
You've been a leader, and I have run a yoga retreat center as well. I know that I'd 100 times choose a person who is straightforward with me and who knows the framework within which they are working, than someone who always says yes and then afterwards doesn't deliver, or afterwards is bitching behind my back.
Absolutely.
Very good point. I appreciate that.
And it's that sort of, it frees people up because it's a double-sided clarity. Because when you're not feeling assertive, it's probably really difficult for the other side to manage that conversation with you also.
And to support you.
Yeah, because it's just, blurry. It's difficult for both sides to actually, get to where you're going. And so what you just said sort of touched on what we're trying to avoid. So assertiveness is not being aggressive, sort of blowing up and saying, oh, you've asked me to do this again, it's not being aggressive, but it's also not being passive aggressive by saying yes, internalizing the frustration and irritation, and then, complaining to everybody else on the team about it later. So it's good to kind of distinguish those things aren't going to help you, and here's how to again sort of work through this in a more level-headed, pragmatic way for everybody.
Fantastic. And this is like what I'm hearing when I hear you talk about this, is it's true teamwork, not only with your equals, but also with your superiors. So when the manager does come with something, you're not an automatic no, you're not an automatic yes, but you're saying, basically coming from a mindset of, I want to do my best, I really want to support this, I take ownership almost in the project and in pride in what I'm working on. And in order to be able to do my best work, can you please support me with A, B, C, D, E? So there is an actual teamwork mindset rather than an us against them, or those guys up there and we down here, which I've always found to be really important. And when I know where I stand and where I can give my everything and deliver my best work, that is then in return usually appreciated. Unless I end up in a toxic environment, it's usually appreciated by the people both above, lateral and below as well.
100%. Attitude is everything. People love working with people who bring a great energy and great spirit. And that doesn't mean that challenging things aren't happening. It means that you can deal with it in your stride and and manage the pressures in a level-headed way.
Absolutely. So we've already covered a lot of ground. What are other elements to assertiveness? What do I need to, I guess, develop in myself in order to be as my best assertive self?
Yeah, well, it neatly brings us on to the next thing that that I really noticed, and I think is super important, and we're sort of beginning to talk about that, is actually bringing or approaching with good spirit. So I think, and certainly what I've noticed from not just clients but friends, family members, is people can avoid a tough conversation or confrontation because they have the expectation that it's going to blow up the bridge. And it can sort of, people can go into something with a win-lose mentality, or an aggressive mentality that this is what I want. There's going to be a price, and it's going to blow up. And so naturally people avoid the negative fallout because they're seeing it as this combative or argumentative situation. And I think if you change the energy that you bring to it, to sort of think about what their needs and values
100%
might be, like really think about things from their perspective as well as what you're trying to speak up for or assert for. And I think basically that tough conversations or hard feedback or things like that can be delivered in a really respectful, level-headed and calm way. And if it comes, particularly if it comes from a place of support, understanding and empathy, then a tough message, tough love can be received in a completely different way than if you're coming from a place of blame or criticism.
Brilliant. What I'm hearing there, or the way that functions in my mind, is basically to be if you're working for a corporation, especially, or for a bigger organization, or really, honestly, I remember that leading a business as well, is when you are really clear about what the message of the business is, what the aim of the business is, and again, have the integrity within that to know what's right, what's wrong, what's a yes, what's a no, because you can then hold to that standard and basically call out anything that's not in alignment with that, including potentially your superior. I've worked in tech as well, not in your kind of position, but in decisive little corners, because I was a very early employee for a very successful growing business. So I kind of was a bit of a spider in the web there, knowing everybody. And I've sometimes even called up out some of the top management, reminding them, and respectfully, obviously, mostly anyway. And the other thing that I've always found is then being respected is if you have the guts to go to the people who are the decision makers, rather than standing in the kitchenette with the other employees bitching behind their back. I think
100%.
that is something that will earn you over time the respect of the leadership if you're willing to address these things humbly. One thing I've come to learn in later years with my journeys through yoga and yogic philosophy, etc., is the framework of thinking of yourself as a servant of the project, a servant of the work that you are doing, a server of something higher than yourself, where you are basically always measuring against, am I doing this out of ego? And is this like an ego trip because I don't like the faith, or I've just a personal grudge against that person? Or am I here to serve the higher purpose of the business, of what's good and righteous, of sometimes defending a team member against injustice? I remember calling stuff like this out as well when somebody isn't being treated right. I've actually rallied the troops to support people in the past as well. Because, and again, the assertiveness comes, what you said in the start is so important, from being fully clear on knowing that you stand on solid ground, either morally or when it comes to knowing the business and knowing yourself.
Yeah, and I think what you're touching on there, I think there's an important thing that I'm thinking while you're talking about this, and calling out, speaking up for somebody or for yourself, and calling out inappropriate behavior or bad behavior. And I think the first thing in terms of that type of assertiveness, that I think is really important to keep front of mind is that, and as you're saying about sort of the higher purpose, businesses cannot thrive with toxic cultures.
Yes.
It is not the fluffy stuff. It will affect the bottom line eventually, either through high employee turnover, high client turnover. It will have a bottom line impact. And so you're really doing the business a favor. And as you said, instead of kind of just talking to people in the kitchen, really escalating it and talking to management about it, you're really doing them a favor, because if they're the right management team and they're listening and they care, then that's a risk. That's a risk that you're raising the flag, and it's like, okay, there's a problem here. We need to sort it out. And so I think there should be some sort of confidence and validation that it's really worthwhile doing that and being assertive in those situations.
And the thing is, you are earning the respect of the right people with that. The people who don't respect that, yes, you might run into a problem if you have like toxic people in very high positions, and you might eventually be edged out of the business. Painful, a journey I don't wish upon anyone. And in the end of the day, you'll be looking back glad that you got out of there eventually, and probably unlikely found another place to work for. But usually the good people who are in the higher positions, the one who hopefully hold real power, they will respect that, because they know that you are backing up the bigger picture of that business for sure.
And setting a standard.
Yes.
It's like you're setting a standard, you're communicating that standard, and you know, hopefully it's a raising the bar for everybody. It's an opportunity to reflect and raise the bar.
Yeah.
So yeah, as you say, the right management team, the right ears are going to want to hear that and are going to want to look for ways to fix that. Or perhaps it isn't the best business in the long term.
The institute where you and I both trained, when it comes to coaching, you might have done more training. I have done more training as well, but we have this one institute in common where we met. Actually, within their manifesto, within their kind of framework of how we're working, has this one sentence that really stuck with me and that has informed my work. Before that, I was doing it, but I didn't have words for it. But then eventually that really gave me that like words framework, is live your life and work as if everybody was taking their cue from you. And I find that so valuable. It is basically everybody would show up the way that you do. Would this still be a good place to work? Would this still be sustainable? Would you get anywhere? Or if you are kind of floundering and taking the easy way out, if everybody was showing up exactly the way you do, also passive or passive aggressive, would this be a place where you want to be? And I've made this, and I don't know if I have 100% track record, and that's probably not. I also got my, dark days.
We all do.
Basically, I've really taken this on as an important element. And I think that is part of what allows me to be assertive, because I know that when I look at my actions throughout, minus the ones where I had a shit day, I know that I can look back, and even if somebody calls me out, I have good reasons why I've done what I've done. Yeah. And that's another piece of solid ground that I'm standing on.
Be a role model.
Yeah, be the leader you want to see in the world.
Yes.
So cheesy and so true.
Yeah, so true. And when you are in a position of management, you do move into a different realm. It doesn't matter. I think it's totally relevant whether you're in management or not, because you're a leader anyway. You're a leader in yourself and in your role and what you do. But as a manager, I used to tell myself when I walked in the door, remind myself, you are affecting people's days. You're affecting their day. The energy you bring, you can, if I was in a bad mood, I can instantly set off, somebody and their day and their
and that has
energy.
So many ripple effects.
Yeah. So it is that reminder of like how you hold yourself, and you're being conscious of that energy that you're bringing out, and that bar that you set. And I think it's a really inspiring and motivating thing to set that bar high for everybody to respect where they work and what they do.
100%. And I think in that sense, leadership, particularly leadership of self, like not everybody will end up in a leadership position. And that's a good thing, because many people will rather be a really good supporter, a really good technician or expert in their field than having to lead people. But having a mindset of leadership of self, I think really strongly integrates with assertiveness as well. Because again, you know what you stand for, and you know what is and isn't your job. Let's come back to other elements to tap into with assertiveness. Maybe because we're probably going to keep it at another 5 to 10 minutes with this conversation. What are other things that I need to put in place to be able to truly be assertive?
Yeah, so I think the next thing is that I would say is really just get support. So it could be a colleague, it could be your manager, it could be an HR manager, it could be a friend whose opinions you trust, but just the process of soundboarding, brainstorming, talking about how to navigate something that's a bit tricky will just prepare you so well and allow you to be so much more level-headed and considered in actually going through what you need to say, or a coach. It could be anyone whose opinion you trust. But I think just that process of sort of brainstorming can really, instead of doing it on the fly and maybe being reactive or just being a bit on the back foot, when you're going through it, it's so much better to sort of be on the front foot and have thought through it a little bit first.
Couple of notes even of what the key points are that you want to address, and potentially also in order of priority. So if you know one of them is a hairy topic, probably bring the other ones first. And with sounding boarding, it's true sounding boarding, not bitch fest.
Yeah, exactly.
Because talking to a friend or talking to a colleague can easily devolve into this sort of bitch fest. Pick the people who are a good friend, as in they are calling you out, they are challenging you, and they will hold you and set you straight.
100%.
And then run it by them so that you can bounce these ideas and really fortify the points that you want to make before you are going into the tricky conversation. 100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. What else?
I have one more.
One more. Perfect.
I have one more that I think is huge, and also so simple, is that confidence is repetition. So just, starting to become more comfortable in doing it. And I'm actually thinking of this great book by James Clear, The Atomic Habits, the 1%. Yeah, just thinking about not these leaps, people don't become assertive overnight. It doesn't happen in these wild leaps. It's often just incremental changes. It's like a muscle. It can be like a muscle. So just thinking about, how can I just be 1% more assertive in something tomorrow? Maybe it's, I don't know, with in a restaurant with, bad customer service, or don't have to be aggressive, just assertive is, it could be just little things where maybe you don't speak up and maybe you bitch to your friend instead, and just thinking, how can I actually speak up and just say something in a level-headed, calm, positive or neutral way. And just that practice, just that repetition can build that muscle for when, it's something bigger and more important that you're facing.
And I've found that what really works for me is often just to ask a question rather than make a confrontative statement. Instead of saying, look, excuse me, my soup is cold. It's like, that's probably a bad example, but to say, I'm not sure if it's meant to be a cold. I was under the understanding that this was a warm dish, and it might have been that it's taken a little bit too long. It's really delicious. However, it's cold. Would it be possible to warm this up for me, rather than going, what the hell, this is a bad restaurant? And like, rather than throwing something at them where they basically have to get defensive in response, it's just like asking a polite question and asking for help almost will always get you what you need, because they can't arm against that.
Oh, 100%. And I'm a big fan of the, how somebody treats a waiter tells you everything you need to know about them. So I'm not saying, it's not about, taking down a waitress that's forgotten something. But as I was saying earlier, with the good spirit, if for example, if I don't really like it if people start clearing the table before everybody's finished eating.
Absolutely.
That's something that is just like, it rushes, especially if it's older people. It's like, and I'm usually the one, when it happens, I'll say something, because I genuinely think, if you know this, and I worked in hospitality when I was at uni, if you know that, that's going to be much nicer for all your other customers as well. If you just leave all the plates there until everybody's finished, and then, clear them away. And there's been a few times when I've said, hey, sorry, is it okay if we just leave the plates on the table till everybody's finished? It's just a bit, so people aren't feeling rushed. Is that okay? And it's instantly, I'm saying what I'd like to happen, but bringing that good spirit, coming from, I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad. I'm just saying what I think should happen, with that good energy. And I've never had a bad response to it. It's like, in fact, I've had people say, I'm going to talk to my manager about that. It's the first time I've heard about that. That's, so I think just approaching it with a good spirit and good energy, you can say what you need to say, and not blow up the bridge.
Exactly. And kindness goes a long, long way in
100%.
even in the long run, building goodwill over time with people, because you never know when you might need a favor. And I believe strongly that the vibe that we're putting out there, just in general, is what comes back to us. And then sometimes a blow up comes, and sometimes a negative, toxic person enters your life. That happens to the best of us. And sometimes we keep drawing this because there's some sort of often assertiveness lesson in there. And
boundary.
By having built a lot of goodwill with other people, you then have people to fall back on and to check in on and support you through challenging times. Anyway, Esther, we're going to leave it as this. This has been so valuable, because what I love about what you just did was you've given us really specific points. And I think there's very specific touch points that people can work on. Guys, if you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I have, you can go down below the video and find Esther's contact details, Esther's website, and more information about her. Her social media is very worthwhile checking out. And as always, if you like our content, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell button so that you get notifications when we're putting out new content. And if you have any additional questions, or you would like to make remarks or share your own stories about assertiveness and how it has or hasn't worked for you in the past, please feel free to leave us a comment down in the comment section below, and we will reply to you as soon as possible. Thank you so much, Esther. I'm looking forward to having you back at another time.
I would love that. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.